It is a common assertion in the West that Buddhism lacks heaven and hell, unlike Christianity. This is true in some ways, but false in others, because while these realms are not eternal, they represent transient conditions of great distress or pleasure within the universe. The term hell is borrowed from Christian language, yet it functions more like a purgatory, where punishment is never eternal, even if the negative results are exceptionally severe. These descriptions are often missing from meditation courses, but remain vital for understanding Buddhist bliss and suffering realms, starting with the concept of Niraya. Niraya serves as the generic Pali term for the lowest type of rebirth, which loosely translates to hell. It shares superficial similarities with Christian ideas, such as the use of fire as a common form of torture. Before exploring the specific levels, we should consider a quote from the Buddha regarding the nature of this place. The ordinary person might imagine hell as a physical location below the ocean or the earth, but the Buddha taught that hell is actually pain. These graphic descriptions of hellish realms serve as analogies for the intensity of the pain a being can experience. While this might seem metaphorical, the suttas and commentaries still describe hell as an actual destination for rebirth. One can encounter hellish suffering on earth, but it is also possible to be reborn into a state of continual torment. The fact that the essence of hell is pain does not mean it is a fable or that it is not playing out in a specific experience. The essence of heaven is pleasure, while the essence of hell is pain, and both exist as real outcomes within the cosmic cycle. Now, this isn't explained in the Buddhist scriptures, but just as there are 9 choirs in heaven, there exist 9 orders of hell, each one belonging to a specific level of intelligence and advancement. In heaven, we have angels, what are known as Buddhas or gods in Oriental religions, archangels, which are the equivalent to bodhisattvas. Then there are principalities, powers, virtues, dominions, thrones, cherubim, and seraphim. I've heard some criticism from people who are more associated with general spirituality, claiming that it's suspicious that a place like heaven would continue to use what may appear to us as social hierarchies with distinct status ranks. But that isn't what's happening here at all. These ranks in power are just differences in evolution and ability, or wisdom and intelligence. We're the ones who created the titles, not them. It's just a means of understanding that there are different kinds of Buddhas and angels in the cosmos, all with varying degrees of wisdom. At the most, the only conceit and sense of social status that may continue to linger would be in the asura or demigod realm, because these are the lowest of the heavens. Now, likewise, the inverse exists in hell, so I would point out that any significant sense of pride and conceit would accumulate here. In Niraya, some of the titles are the same. There are demons, then wardens or janitors, powers or rings, potentates or managers, principalities, dominions, and so on. There are many levels of Niraya and various consequences that correlate to specific actions that I could describe in more detail, but that may better exist in a separate series of talks. But due to the general psychological condition of this human species in this age, what I can say is that most people on this planet have already seen the first few levels of Niraya numerous times in their life. And this is demonstrated to us in our dreams. Every chasing dream, every dream where we can't escape the rooms or buildings we're in, and every disturbing, frightening, or horrifying nightmare is a level of Niraya. If you've had bad dreams where there's illness all over town, that's because the majority of people who die continue to wander around in the dream world, which is the afterlife. But many of them have turned into hungry ghosts. If you've had nightmares where there's a lot of violence and blood, this is a deeper level of the astral plane that we are learning about here. Now, ending up in Niraya requires the commitment of very grievous karma during one's life. 5 specific deeds result in a certain rebirth there. Killing one's mother or father or an arahant, as well as wounding a Buddha or creating a schism in the Sangha.
Because only bhikkhus can create a schism, there is a saying that monks can go to hell more easily than lay people. This highlights a massive emphasis on sustaining harmony and consistent teachings within the community because the results of division are so severe. The Buddha also mentioned many times that wrong view can lead to hell. This does not mean a wrong view itself leads there directly, but rather that it leads a person to commit grievous actions without understanding the consequences. People often find many ways of justifying murder or other horrors by claiming the ends justify the means, but it turns out they do not. Specific stories illustrate the acts that precipitate such a downfall, like that of Devadatta. As a cousin of the Buddha who tried to kill him several times, Devadatta represents the kind of extreme negative action that leads to the lowest realms. As his existence concluded, the ground split apart. This occurs occasionally in diverse accounts. The soil fractures and a creature plunges straight through a gap into the infernal plains. Because his transgression was exceptionally heinous, he descended into Avici hell. This is the deepest and most agonizing of those domains. He emerged there with a colossal frame. His physical form was so massive that his soles met the base while his crown reached the peak. Sharp blades stabbed him from every angle without pause. He will remain in that state for one entire kalpa. Such harsh and vivid karmic consequences are daunting, yet it is claimed that once his duration there concludes and he enters the subsequent era as a person, he will achieve the status of a Pacceka Buddha.
This represents the hopeful aspect of the tradition, the fact that perdition is never permanent. It is likely that any viewer of this production has already visited such places multiple times. One has probably inhabited the celestial spheres on numerous occasions as well. Given that the cycle of samsara is considered without a beginning, you have essentially experienced everything the cosmos offers except for one milestone, liberation. That alone ends the cycle of rebirth, but we have already sampled everything else. There is always a chance for salvation. You are effectively serving a term that eventually expires. The punishment is finite. The reality of these abysses is forged by a person's specific karma. There is a supernatural element to it, an dark sorcery of sorts, since these realms ignore standard physics. The fires within Avici hell are so fierce that a normal observer 1,000 yojanas away would have their sight destroyed just by glancing at them. Beings trapped there are perpetually scorched by this heat, yet they are never incinerated. That often presents a rational puzzle. How do these creatures endure without passing away? The scales of mental agony function in that manner. The misery simply continues indefinitely. The trauma remains constant, but never reaches a finality. Avici hell is described as a metal container measuring 100 yojanas in every dimension. It is crammed with tortured souls so densely that any motion causes them to collide with one another. This creates an extra layer of distress. Blazes roar from every surface toward the opposite side. They surge from the north to the south and from the roof to the ground. Ancient texts situate this place at a specific depth beneath our world, under Jambudvipa. In this visualization, the bedrock of samsara supports everything else on its surface. While 1 yojana equals 12 kilometers, making it quite large, it is minor compared to the total universe. Our own land, Jambudvipa, is supposedly 1,000 yojanas wide, so this is a minute, concentrated point of maximum suffering that exists as the very origin of conditioned existence. This environment resembles a gravitational singularity. Similar to the collapse of a star in astrophysics, a massive amount of energy is compressed into a singular point of extreme density. One could speculate that the hypothetical experience of crossing an event horizon is comparable to entering Avici. It is worth noting the existence of higher infernal planes that are less severe. Discussing these regions requires caution because a perfectly logical system, like the one describing the heavens, is absent.
The celestial maps are organized neatly into 6 sensual, 16 form, and 4 formless realms. Conversely, the subterranean domains lack a unified structure within the primary scriptures. While later commentaries attempt to impose order, various texts introduce conflicting hells that disrupt the framework. Some overviews describe 8 primary hells with 4 subsections each, yet this appears to be an artificial attempt to organize what is naturally disordered. These realms seem to manifest on an individual basis, where a person's specific actions generate a customized space of suffering.
The fundamental nature of these depths, as seen in both Western and Greek mythology, is absolute disorder. It is logical that these places are asymmetrical and profoundly repulsive. The celestial heights represent the inverse. They are characterized by perfect symmetry and elegance, embodying truth and goodness. While the residents and structures in the heavens are radiant, the inhabitants of the lower depths are described as grotesque and misshapen. From a Buddhist perspective, the concept of evil is simply a colloquialism for being unskillful. A poorly navigated life results in this inherent chaos, which seems to be a built-in feature of the cosmos. The narrative of the mariner, Mitavindaka, illustrates this. This account from the Jatakas describes a man seeking wealth through maritime trade. His mother begged him to stay, citing her dependence on him and the hazards of the ocean. In a fit of rage, he assaulted her and departed for the sea regardless. Once offshore, the vessel became stranded in a dead calm. The crew utilized a lottery to identify a source of bad luck and singled him out, eventually casting him into the water. He reached a shore featuring a crystal mansion and 4 attractive women. Believing he had found fortune, he indulged in divine luxuries for 1 week. However, these hosts were Vimanapeta, entities that experience heavenly joy temporarily before returning to agony. When they transformed into repulsive spirits, he escaped to the water and discovered a silver residence with 8 women. The cycle repeated there, and again at a golden palace with 16 women. Finally, he reached a coast containing what appeared to be a magnificent city protected by 4 gates. He believed his luck had reached its peak. He anticipated immense fortune, viewing the large 4-gated city as a promise of greater riches and companions. However, his own karma deceived him. The magnificent city was actually the Usada hell. Upon entering, he encountered a victim enduring torture from a rotating wheel of blades that sent blood streaming down his face. Distorted by his past actions, Mitavindaka perceived this weapon as a radiant lotus. He demanded the object, and when the sufferer asked if he truly desired it, Mitavindaka confirmed. The previous victim transferred the spinning blades to Mitavindaka's head, and, his own debt paid, vanished instantly. The illusion shattered, leaving Mitavindaka trapped in agony for a vast duration as punishment for assaulting his mother. This Jataka tale illustrates how moral blindness can cause the mind to perceive the repulsive as beautiful. This phenomenon mirrors a common human experience. People engaged in destructive behaviors often labor under the delusion that their actions are beneficial or significant. The true nature of their involvement is only unmasked once the consequences materialize. Regarding further accounts of these realms, the travels of Mahamoggallana are particularly noteworthy.
His teachings didn't necessarily evolve from the Vedas or Upanishads. They were a very radical or subtle shift based on a direct observation of reality. So one must also consider Lokantara Nirayas, the inner world hells. The architecture of the universe consists of circular world systems, or chakawalas, that abet one another like wheels. And these arrangements leaves, this arrangement leaves a roughly triangular void in the spaces between these worlds. These regions are characterized by absolute darkness and freezing temperatures, because the sun's orbit remains below the walls of the world system. So rebirth in this realm is the specific consequence of holding a heavy wrong view, where intellectual darkness manifests as physical gloom. The inhabitants cling to the outer walls like bats, and they suffer from profound isolation. On the rare occasions they encounter one another, another one like them, they make the mistake of perceiving them as food. They mistake that contact. So in the ensuing struggle, eventually they lose their grip and fall into the caustic sea upon which the worlds float, and where their forms disintegrate or dissolve. Now, I don't know how long it takes to dissolve. If it's instantaneous, it probably isn't. It's probably very much like being in the other levels, very slowly. So this is a profound psychological alienation, a fringe consciousness entirely rejected by any social structure. And these beings lack even the camaraderie of outcasts. They're utterly solitary. They cling to the exterior of existence, forever or near so excluded from the desires of the world. And so this is the manifestation of absolute isolation and madness. And if we explore these dimensions, well, it's uncommon to explore them in modern meditation circles, because that's usually not the focus. It's the cosmology and the planes are usually not the focus. And during the time of the Buddha, he was hesitant to discuss these topics unless he was asked 3 times, or he was really, people were eagerly wanting to know. But the silence can lead to the misconceptions that these places don't exist in the tradition. So these descriptions serve as a very essential precautionary. There are tangible consequences to any unskillful behavior, because that unskillful behavior is coming from some kind of ego, some skata. And it's rational to fear the results of harm. But it's not the means necessarily. It can be, it sometimes is, fear is a means, but it's, when schools and teachers use fear, it's for the greater good, ultimately. But the intention is always awareness, concern, and prudence. You have to be aware, and you have to foresee the future. Imagine what your progress would be like years from now, where you want to be years from now. The concern has to be there. In certain Eastern traditions, like in Burma, these descriptions of the Niraya and Peta realms are utilized in hellfire sermons to catalyze this diligence. So the primary objective is to emphasize that the only security against descending or from descending into these places is the attainment of stream entry or sotapanna enlightenment. If you have some lives to work with to continue, because then you're not really going to go anywhere down from that point. Your next human lives will be very similar or even better, more beneficial. So that's typical. But so even those who've lived generously and accumulated lots of good dharma, if they receive a relief from the human or celestial, even a celestial rebirth, if they really do manage to create that much Dhamma, which in this day and age, frankly, isn't realistic for most people because of how much immense karma we have, then, if you do, for whatever reason, especially in the time of the Buddha, these people would get these kinds of vacations more often. The rebirth would be temporary. Their stay would be temporary. And because the khandhas are still there, especially if they didn't work on themselves, they didn't eliminate their khandhas or samskaras through the stream entry, the mental conditioning is still there, and the karma is still there. So the karma will pull you back down. That conditioning belongs to a certain vibration. It belongs to the physical world, more or less, and even lower. So that's why we can't, especially in this day and age, we really can't count on this. You would have to be like Gandhi to be able to be reborn in a heavenly realm like that. Or at least serving every day to have better existences or opportunities. So, but either way, the relief of oh, sorry, I'm getting sidetracked here. So unlike the Western concept of the eternal afterlife, the heavens and hells and everywhere else in samsara are always temporary places. Transient places, or transitioning places, or resting places. So that eventually that seemingly eternal moment in heaven expires. Now, most commonly, people lack the ability to delay immediate gratification. We have this habit of carrying some short-sightedness, and they have the habit of just doing things immediately. So, or fulfilling ourselves immediately. The typical person and animal as well acts more or less on it at an instinctual level. So we get a lot of gratification when we immediately serve ourselves. So there are people who will walk to a store and see a nice looking iPad or something, cut the security cables and take it and run. But then later on that night at a party, the cops come by and crash it and charge the robber and their friends for stealing and having drugs on them. And in the opposite case, there are people with something like a decade-long academic degree who are broke and just getting by with their basic necessities, eating cheap whole foods like bread and pasta, and surviving off of their free meals from work, and volunteering at charity kitchens. So this illustrates a very broad range of awareness. The most significant achievements are reserved for people who maintain sight of the distant horizon. So this is the general concept of following the spiritual path. It's much more civilized and humane to have the self-control and prudence to pause and deeply reflect on the future.